Get the unmissable news stories of the day.
This is the Beijing Hour.
Examining the events that impact and shape China and the rest of the world. This is the Beijing Hour, 1 hour of news and information brought to you every weekday. Now here's your host.
Hello with you on this Friday, August 21st, 2026. You're listening to the Beijing Hour, coming to you live from the Chinese capital. On today's program, China and Indonesia have held their inaugural comprehensive strategic dialogue in Jakarta. The United States has threatened to impose what it calls the toughest sanctions in history on Iran. And a new travel experience in China as more tourists are stepping into movie sets and living the story themselves. In business, China is to roll out new policies to further boost domestic demand and strengthen economic growth. In sports, the latest from the Badminton World Championships in India. In culture and entertainment, Chinese anti-war film Once Upon a Time in the Middle East is taking cinemas by storm. Now checking today's top stories. China and Indonesia have held the inaugural meeting of their comprehensive strategic dialogue mechanism in Jakarta. The two sides also held their second 2+2 ministerial meeting, bringing together their foreign and defense ministers. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi heads the Chinese delegation. This marks his first visit to Indonesia in 2 years. The discussions in Jakarta are expected to expand China-Indonesia cooperation beyond trade into security and defense coordination. For more on this, Zhongshi and Gathruti Manicum spoke to Professor Wen Yao from the Institute of International Studies at Fudan University.
The inaugural China-Indonesia Comprehensive Strategic Dialogue is in Jakarta. How significant do you think this is for bilateral relations?
Yes, I think it's very significant as this is a first step to institutionalizing a comprehensive strategic mechanism between China and Indonesia. The two sides have agreed to build a shared community for a shared future between China and Indonesia. And before that, China and Indonesia were already comprehensive strategic partners. So the next step will be to find concrete ways to build such a community and also to issue directives to responsible departments, agencies, and officials to find a detailed way to implement different areas of cooperation. So I think this is a good step to summarize what has been done and to find strategic priority for future directions.
When during the meeting, the discussions are expected to expand beyond trade into security and defense coordination, how would you assess this?
Yes, I think it's a natural thing to happen because there are in total 5 pillars of this relationship between China and Indonesia, namely politics, economy, maritime affairs, security, and people-to-people ties. So it is natural that such a Indonesia-China community for shared future would expand the talks from economic and trade to more defense and political issue areas. And I think this is also showing that China and Indonesia are exploring and learning new ways to cement this relationship. And I think this is a very good development.
That was Professor Wen Yao from the Institute of International Studies at Fudan University. The Chinese foreign minister's trip to Indonesia follows his visit to South Korea, where he urged greater progress in the bilateral strategic cooperative partnership. In a meeting with South Korean President Lee Jae-myung, Wang said stronger bilateral ties will benefit both countries and contribute to regional peace and prosperity. President Lee said the two countries should become mutually dependent and mutually beneficial partners with complementary strength. Martin Lei reports from Seoul.
Wang has been in Seoul for top-level talks with the government of the Republic of Korea. He's had meetings with the ROK Foreign Minister Cho Yun, followed by President Lee Jae-myung and National Security Advisor Wee Sung-lak. The two foreign ministers stressed the importance of cooperation between China and the ROK. Wang said the ROK is right next to China, the world's largest market, and that strong ties would aid ROK growth. And the ROK president is calling for multi-party talks, likely involving China, to formally end the Korean War which halted with a ceasefire in the 1950s, but no official peace treaty, leaving the peninsula divided. Wang said he hoped the two sides would gradually move towards a path of peace and coexistence. He also discussed cultural ties and the possible visit by the ROK president to an APEC leaders meeting at Shenzhen in China later in the year.
That was Martin Lowe reporting. China and Switzerland have concluded negotiations on an upgrade to their free trade agreement and signed a memorandum of understanding. Chinese Commerce Minister Wang Wentao and Swiss President Guy Parmelin made the announcement after a meeting in Bern. They vowed to speed up their country's procedures to pave the way for the official signing of the upgrade protocol. The China-Switzerland FTA was signed in 2013 and took effect in 2014. It is the first free trade deal between China and a continental European country. Coming up, the United States has threatened to impose what it calls the toughest sanctions in history on Iran.
Do you have a story about China? We want to hear from you. Maybe China has become your second home. Maybe it has brought you new friendships, creative partnerships, or a new path in life. We are inviting people from the U.S. to share their real stories and experiences with China. No expertise needed, just your authentic voice. Your story could be featured in our Hello from the Other Shore podcast coming this September. Share your name, city, and story with us. Email us at radio@cgtn.com.
The U.S. has announced it will impose what it calls the toughest sanctions in history on Iran as it seeks to resolve a war that began nearly 6 months ago. It has not revealed any details. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent urged allies to make a decision on where they stand.
So it is time for our allies and the rest of the world to make a decision, and we are going to squash the economy of this regime. And what we have seen, I see lots of reports that said, oh well, this has never worked. It does work because we have a combination. It is a 1-2 punch. We have the blockade, and we are going to have the toughest sanctions in history.
Bessent's comments followed President Donald Trump's threat a day earlier of what he called economic warfare. Trump has threatened any country that trades with Iran. The U.S. has also announced sanctions on 10 individuals that it considers a part of a network responsible for transferring cash to Hezbollah in Lebanon. Walter Morris reports from Washington, D.C.
Well, U.S. President Donald Trump says his team is no longer negotiating with Tehran, and now he's promising economic warfare and isolation on an unprecedented scale. Now, Trump made his latest threats in a social media post Wednesday evening. He wrote on Truth Social that it will be, quote, the most crushing economic operation ever taken against any country. As part of Trump's economic D-Day, he says any country that allows its financial institutions, businesses, airports, or government entities to assist Iran will also face tremendous economic consequences. The announcement comes days after White House officials revealed the administration is shifting its strategy in Iran. The conflict is now approaching its 7th month, and following Trump's announcement, oil prices climbed 2% Thursday. The Trump administration is also facing mounting economic pressure at home. The American Automobile Association says U.S. gas prices climbed 1 cent this week. According to AAA, the national average is now at $4.10 a gallon. And this week, more U.S. military personnel arriving in the region. The Pentagon says the USS George Washington arrived in the Middle East Wednesday. Senior military officials say the aircraft carrier was sent to the Gulf to relieve the USS Abraham Lincoln. The rotation leaves the United States without an aircraft carrier in the Pacific. The Lincoln has been at sea for an extended deployment due to the war in Iran. And recently, some lawmakers and military families have raised concerns about the mental health of Lincoln crew members due to the long deployment. And the U.S. Treasury Secretary says he'll provide more details about the next steps and new sanctions against Iran Monday.
That was Walter Morris reporting. The Iranian Foreign Ministry has condemned the U.S. economic and trade sanctions against Tehran as economic terrorism. Foreign Minister Said Abbas Araghchi says Washington's moves threaten the global economy and sovereignty of nations worldwide. Araghchi also says the so-called economic D-Day is Trump's attempt to divert attention from his administration's debt crisis. Esin Kivani reports from Tehran.
Iran says that the U.S. has pursued its maximum pressure policy for years, especially during Trump's first term. But Tehran says such extreme measures will never force it to surrender, and that this very dead end is what led Washington and Tel Aviv to launch a war against Iran last year. Now, Iranian officials say continued economic pressure will not produce a different result. Deputy Foreign Minister Kazem Gharibabadi pointed to what he sees as the core issue. American officials keep miscalculating and then feel compelled to cover up each mistake by creating an even bigger failure. Gharibabadi says military war produced no results, and now U.S. officials have named the next defeat an economic war. The rhetorical clash between Tehran and Washington shows no signs of letting up, but regardless of which side ultimately gains the upper hand, the real burden falls on ordinary Iranians, and they're struggling with fuel shortages, frequent power outages, and most critically, inflation at levels they have not seen in decades.
That was Esin Kivani reporting. The leaders of 7 nations have condemned Israel for new settler project plans in the occupied West Bank. France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Norway, Canada, and the UK have condemned Israel's plan to publish tender bids for a new residential settlement project, calling it unacceptable. In a joint statement, the countries reaffirmed their commitment to achieving peace through a two-state solution. Hundreds of thousands of Israeli settlers currently live among millions of Palestinians in territories occupied by Israel during the 1967 war. While international law considers Israeli settlements illegal, Israel contests this position. Turkey, Egypt, and Qatar have condemned the recent Israeli strikes in Gaza and urged Israel to comply with the ceasefire agreement. The 3 mediating countries have accused Israel of undermining efforts to implement the plan to end the conflict in Gaza. The UN says Palestinian civilians, including children in Gaza, continue to be killed and injured by Israeli attacks. It says 94% of Gaza's 2.1 million people are in need of shelter and basic household assistance. Many families have been living in tents or makeshift shelters after their homes and most of Gaza's infrastructure were bombarded by Israel. Moscow has urged Tokyo to acknowledge Japan's aggression in World War II and stop attempts to whitewash its history. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova criticized Japan's push toward remilitarization. She also hit back at Tokyo's protest over President Putin's visit to the southern Kuril Islands, a chain of islands central to a territorial dispute with Japan, which calls them the Northern Territories.
History teaches nothing. It only punishes those who fail to learn its lessons. On these important anniversaries of World War II, the Japanese authorities have neither honestly nor openly admitted their aggression in the Asia-Pacific region, nor sincerely apologized to the victimized peoples of neighboring countries, nor complied with the pacifist provisions of their own constitution. Instead, Tokyo is pushing forward a remilitarization agenda, sliding ever deeper into a dangerous abyss. As for the so-called hurt feelings of the Japanese people, I must point out that this is actually an insult to the Japanese people themselves. In the eyes of the international community, the Japanese people are seen not as a nation that remembers history, but as one that forgets it. We once again call on Japan to fully acknowledge the outcomes of World War II.
Meanwhile, Russian forces have conducted missile strike exercises off the southern Kurils. The Russian Defense Ministry confirmed its Pacific Fleet completed the scheduled drills on Thursday, including live-fire missile operations. The exercises involved engaging hostile warships at distances exceeding 300 kilometers. Concerns over safety and environmental problems linked to U.S. military facilities in Japan have long drawn scrutiny from local communities. A group of governors from 15 prefectures hosting U.S. facilities have submitted a petition to the central government calling for revisions to the Japan-U.S. Status of Forces Agreement. They cited safety concerns involving U.S. military aircraft and hazardous substance leaks from bases. They called for stricter enforcement of Japanese laws on U.S. forces and urged them to comply with local regulations. The 1960 agreement governs the status of U.S. forces stationed in Japan and their use of military facilities. At least 16 people have died and almost 50 are wounded in Russian airstrikes on the Ukrainian capital and the surrounding region. The UN has urged both sides to de-escalate to protect civilians. On Thursday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky appealed to the US for more Patriot missiles to boost air defenses. Zelensky said Ukraine was able to intercept 90% of cruise missiles, but ballistic missiles remain a challenge. In recent months, Moscow's forces have intensified ballistic missile attacks on Kyiv. Alex Query reports from the Ukrainian capital.
Well, yes, it was shortly after midnight that Russia launched yet another barrage of missiles and drones, especially on Kyiv, leading to 16 dead and dozens wounded more. So far, that's all we know, but the casualties might rise because the rescue operations are still ongoing. And if you were in the heart of the city last night, you could actually feel the walls shaking with the vibration of the explosions, and you could still smell the smoke in the air over the capital this morning. Russia hit about 30 locations. A children's hospital was damaged. Its windows were blown out. Russia also hit a school, some residential building, and a warehouse. It launched at least 44 missiles and roughly 160 drones. I'm saying at least because Ukraine recently took the controversial decision not to publish the number of ballistic missiles launched by Russia, arguably over security and communication reasons. But some critics say that it could prove dangerous for civilians on the short term. Now, these attacks highlight once again Ukraine's dire shortage of anti-ballistic missiles. And Ukrainian President Zelensky said, quote, "And as long as Ukraine does not have enough anti-ballistic defense, Russia will not consider peace seriously," end quote. Now, this series of attacks also highlight a worrying pattern. Russia used to attack Ukraine every 2 to 3 weeks. Now it attacks Ukraine every 2 to 3 days. What does it mean? It means that Russia still has large resources to ramp up its missile production and continue pummeling Ukraine before what's going to be one of the harshest winters for Ukraine this year. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, Patriot launchers stay desperately empty.
That was Alex Query in Kyiv. The Russian-controlled Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in Ukraine has lost all access to external power for the third time this week. The UN nuclear watchdog says the plant, the largest in Europe, is relying on diesel-powered generators to support vital safety systems. Dasha Chinisheva reports from Moscow.
We are now getting the confirmation from local authorities that the situation at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is actually critical. That's according to the nuclear power plant's director, Yuri Chernychuk. He said that is because of the intensification and escalation of the military situation around the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. He also noted that this is the 26th time that the station is now relying on the diesel power generators. We understand that they used to be two lines that were connecting the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant to the power supply. One of them going to the Ukrainian side, another one going to the Russian side, Ferrosplavnaya 1. Ferrosplavnaya 1 was the only line that was operating since the end of March, and we understand that there has been some external damage done to this line. As a result of that, the power has got to the diesel generators. So the Russian specialists as well as the Ukrainian specialists are jointly now trying to establish where that damage has been done and to save this situation. We also understand that there has been no interruption. The radiation level is stable. The second line, Dnipropetrovsk one, coming from the Ukrainian side, has been halted in March, and ever since we understand that has not resumed its energy supplies to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant despite the June local ceasefire in the area. And we're also hearing a lot from the Russian authorities who are blaming Ukraine for those Ukrainian attacks against the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Most recently, the Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said the attack by the Ukrainian armed forces against the public transport stop near the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant that killed one staff member of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant has derailed the visit of Rafael Grossi, the IAEA chief. So Russia is saying that Ukraine is deliberately doing that. So obviously this is raising a lot of concerns among the Russian specialists, the Russian authorities, and Russia is saying that they are calling for the international attention to the situation around this crucial object in Europe.
That was Dasha Chernysheва reporting. Coming up, a new travel experience in China as more tourists are stepping into movie sets and living the story themselves.
Discover the realities and responses to our changing climate with Climate Watch. Uncover critical issues such as the Masai Mara's disrupted wildebeest migration and the drop in the Panama Canal's water levels. Delve into solutions for a sustainable future. Tune in to Climate Watch on your favorite podcast platform. Become more eco-conscious and take action to protect our planet.
Now it's 21 minutes past the hour. What if the best souvenir from a trip is not a photo, but a feeling? Across China, more tourists are stepping into movie sets, dressing up as characters and becoming part of the story. Zhang Tao takes us to a movie-themed town in central China where visitors are paying not just to see a place, but to experience it.
As night falls at Zhengzhou Movie Town in Henan Province, vintage signs light up streets designed to recreate the city as it looked centuries ago. Visitors in period costumes stroll past restaurants, shops, and entertainment venues. But here, the setting is only the beginning. Visitors can interact with actors, follow storylines, and for a few hours, step out of their everyday lives. Li Xueyao from the movie town says that is changing what tourists value.
People care more about what they experience and how they feel here, rather than simply taking a few beautiful photos.
The movie town has built its attractions around that shift, turning its streets into a stage where visitors can walk into performances and become part of the story.
First, more visitors are willing to travel specifically for high-quality content, with more people coming just to see a particular show. Second, they're demanding more cultural depth. Beautiful sets alone are no longer enough to keep them coming back. The experience needs authentic culture and stories that can truly move them.
That search for emotional connection is also drawing visitors to other immersive attractions. Beijing tourist Zhang Ningning recently visited Wanshui Mountain martial arts city in Henan. She was fascinated by actors dressed as martial arts characters, standing motionless by the water and maintaining their poses in all kinds of weather. But what stayed with her most was Da Tian Hua, a traditional Chinese spectacle in which molten iron is struck into the night sky, sending showers of sparks above the audience.
I literally got goosebumps watching it. The music and the narration were so moving that I ended up crying. When the molten iron was sent flying into the sky and those golden sparks came raining down, the impact of seeing it live was something you just cannot get from watching a video.
For Zhao, the difference between immersive tourism and conventional sightseeing comes down to one thing: how long the experience stays with you.
With ordinary tourism, you might visit a place and then forget about it. Sometimes you only remember it later when you look through your photos or talk about it with friends. But with immersive tourism, the memories stay with you.
Their desire for lasting experiences reflects a broader shift in Chinese consumption. A 2025 report by the China Academy of Information and Communications Technology estimated that China's experience economy exceeded 18 trillion yuan, or around $2.7 trillion by the end of November, up over 22%. Tourism is only one part of that economy, but increasingly, consumers are willing to pay for more than a physical product, a story, a sense of participation, or a moment they can remember. Li Xueyao at the movie town in Zhengzhou says immersive tourism can also offer an escape from the pressures of everyday life.
With the fast pace and pressure of everyday life, immersive experiences can feel like a temporary parallel world. You can change your clothes, step into a story, and briefly leave your everyday identity and pressure behind.
At Zhengzhou Movie Town, the attraction may ultimately be selling more than a replica of Old Zhengzhou or series of performances. It is selling the chance to step into another world, become part of a story, and take the feeling home. For the Beijing Hour, this is Jiang Tao.
Nepali people who have visited Xizang, an autonomous region in southwest China sharing a mountainous border with Nepal, have shared experiences of Xizang's culture, governance, and efforts to protect its environment.
I think the beauty of Xizang lies in its culture. The architecture there is very distinctive, and many ancient buildings have been preserved. Together with the beautiful lakes and snow-capped mountains, they form a beautiful and deeply moving picture.
What I found very impressive was the planning and governance in Xizang. From a cultural perspective, traditional culture has been well preserved. In terms of environmental protection, development and construction are moving forward while the natural beauty is being maintained. Seeing all of this with my own eyes was truly impressive.
I think that, as members of the media, we need to fully verify information before making judgments and sharing it. I would encourage people to go and see for themselves, learn more about Xizang, and then form their own judgment.
Infrastructure such as a land-based port between Xizang and a village in Nepal has been facilitating their trade and people-to-people exchanges. Spain is allowing around 500 migrant children in the North African enclave of Ceuta to relocate to the Spanish mainland in a major immigration U-turn. The decision comes as the government increases emergency shelters for up to 1,800 migrants remaining in Ceuta following last month's mass influx from Morocco. But the European Union insists that all migrants must return to Morocco. The United Nations says authorities in Afghanistan have released 2 national staff members who were detained more than a week ago. UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric says the 2 appear to be in good health and authorities have dropped the charges against them.
We are delighted they are out. However, the mission has not been formally notified of the reasons for their arrest and their detention in the first place, and we're continuing to follow up with the de facto authorities.
Dujarric also says the UN is calling on authorities to respect the UN's privileges and protect its staff.
This includes seeking to ensure respect for the privileges and immunities of the UN, as well as the safety, the security, and the freedom of movement of UN staff and associated personnel as they go about their mandated work.
Dujarric adds that the Houthis in Yemen continue to hold 73 UN colleagues. The UN is calling for their immediate release. Now it's 29 minutes past the hour, checking the forecast before the break. Beijing will have thunder showers tonight and tomorrow. The low is 24 and it's up to 32 on Saturday. Shanghai will see light rain tonight and tomorrow with a low of 26 and a high of 31. Chongqing will be cloudy tonight and tomorrow with a low of 27 and a high of 35. Nanchang will see thunder showers tonight and tomorrow with a low of 27 and a high of 33. Lhasa will have light rain tonight, tomorrow showers with a low of 12 and a high of 21. Elsewhere in Asia, Islamabad will see light rain tonight and tomorrow the low is 25 and is up to 33 on Saturday. Vientiane will have light rain tonight, tomorrow moderate rain with a low of 24 and a high of 30 degrees Celsius. Now it's time for a short break. So far this hour, China and Indonesia have held their inaugural comprehensive strategic dialogue in Jakarta. The United States has threatened to impose what it calls the toughest sanctions in history on Iran. Tian Lu with you, stay with here on the Beijing Hour.
The transition to a greener future is no longer a distant goal. It's happening now. In power plants, factories, farms and cities across China. As the world grapples with climate change, energy security and the growing demand for electricity, China is searching for new ways to cut emissions while keeping its economy moving. Across the country, our reporters visit renewable energy hubs, industrial centers, and agricultural communities to see what that transformation looks like in practice. Through first-hand stories and on-the-ground reporting, we explore the opportunities, the challenges, and the ideas shaping China's green transition. Listen to China's Green Code, Rewriting the Rules of Growth, a special series from Climate Watch, available wherever you get your podcasts.
Examining the events that impact and shape China and the rest of the world. This is the Beijing Hour, 1 hour of news and information brought to you every weekday. Now here's your host.
Tian Lu with you on this Friday. Still to come, in business, China is to roll out new policies to further boost the domestic demand and strengthen economic growth. In sports, the latest from the Badminton World Championships in India. In culture and entertainment, Chinese anti-war film Once Upon a Time in the Middle East is taking cinemas by storm. To contact us, you can email radio@cgtn.com or follow our X account @cgtnradio. You're also welcome to subscribe to our Substack newsletter Beyond Beijing for the world's biggest stories, along with sharp insights and exclusive analysis. But first, checking today's headlines. China and Indonesia have held the inaugural meeting of their comprehensive strategic dialogue mechanism in Jakarta. The two sides also held their second 2+2 ministerial meeting, bringing together their foreign and defense ministers. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi heads the Chinese delegation. This marks his first visit to Indonesia in 2 years. The discussions in Jakarta are expected to expand China-Indonesia cooperation beyond trade into security and defense coordination. China and Switzerland have concluded negotiations on an upgrade to their free trade agreement and signed a memorandum of understanding. Chinese Commerce Minister Wang Wentao and Swiss President Guy Parmelin made the announcement after a meeting in Bern. They vowed to speed up their country's procedures to pave the way for the official signing of the upgrade protocol. The China-Switzerland FTA was signed in 2013 and took effect in 2014. It is the first free trade deal between China and a continental European country. The air forces of China and the United Arab Emirates will hold a joint training in Xinjiang from late August to mid-September. The training will include command simulations, flight training, and live force exercises in mixed formations. The exercise aims to enhance the tactical capabilities of participating units and deepen ties and cooperation between the two militaries. Local authorities say severe flooding triggered by Typhoon Mesak last month killed over 150 people and left 10 others missing in 2 cities in Guangxi. The flooding affected over 1.6 million people in Nanning and Guigang. The city's focus is now on post-disaster recovery, reconstruction, and enhancing disaster prevention, mitigation, and relief capabilities. Turkey, Egypt, and Qatar have condemned recent Israeli strikes in Gaza and urged Israel to comply with the ceasefire agreement. The three mediating countries have accused Israel of undermining efforts to implement the plan to end the conflict in Gaza. The UN says Palestinian civilians, including children in Gaza, continue to be killed and injured by Israeli attacks. It says 94% of Gaza's 2.1 million people are in need of shelter and basic household assistance. Many families have been living in tents or makeshift shelters after their homes, and most of Gaza's infrastructure were bombarded by Israel. The United Nations is calling on Russia and Ukraine to de-escalate as fighting intensifies. Russia launched a major overnight attack on Kiev and the surrounding region, firing missiles and drones for hours. At least 16 people were killed. Spokesperson Stefan Dujarric says the United Nations condemns the attacks and is calling for an urgent de-escalation.
The Secretary General reiterates his call for an urgent de-escalation leading to a full, immediate and unconditional ceasefire and for a just and sustainable comprehensive peace in line with international law, including UN Charter and all relevant United Nations resolutions.
UN humanitarian partners have also launched an emergency response to help people affected by the attacks in Kiev. A long heat wave and a severe drought have pushed the Danube River to record low levels in Hungary. The low water has disrupted shipping, with cargo traffic on the Hungarian section nearly at a standstill. Some international cruise ships can no longer reach Budapest. Zilma Bontod, the vice president of Hungary's Shipbrokers and Agents Association, says the situation is affecting supply chains across Europe.
Shipping goods on the Danube has become almost impossible. It's disrupting freight transport and supply chains. And this is not just a problem for Hungary, it's affecting the whole of Europe.
The disruption comes as Hungary prepares for its autumn grain harvest. You're listening to the Beijing Hour. Coming up in business, China is to roll out new policies to further boost domestic demand and strengthen economic growth.
The Beijing Hour, your window on China and the rest of the world.
36 minutes past the hour, turning to business, here's Wang Zihang.
Thank you, Tianlu. Stock markets on the Chinese mainland closed higher on Friday. The Shanghai Composite was up slightly. The Shenzhen Component gained almost 0.9%. Precious metal and telecommunications equipment shares led the gainers. Timothy Pope has more.
The Chinese mainland markets are defined by that volatility at the moment, as well as aggressive sector rotations. The energy was back in tech and AI and growth stocks, so the broader Shanghai Composite Index essentially went nowhere. There was tech, energy, biotech pulling upwards, and consumer, real estate and utilities pulling downwards. The Shenzhen Component was up 0.9%. The China Export added 1.4%. A good way of describing it, investors are behaving a bit like they're trying to get into a really hot bath. It's not long before they can't stand that heat and they have to jump out. Then after a minute, they jump right back in again. And the bath in this case is exposure to highly crowded AI and technology stocks with growing valuation questions.
There was Timothy Pope with the mainland markets. Elsewhere in Hong Kong, the Hang Seng Index rose over 1.2%. Japan's Nikkei declined 0.3%. Chinese authorities say the country will introduce a new set of policies to further boost domestic demand and strengthen economic growth. The Finance Ministry says it will design and implement new measures in response to macroeconomic conditions in the second half of this year. Fiscal policies will continue to focus on accelerating the use of funds, expanding domestic demand, and improving fiscal management and reform. Expanding domestic demand has become increasingly important for China to sustain economic growth and build economic resilience amid external uncertainties. According to the ministry, between January and July, two consumption-boosting policies provided about 1.9 trillion yuan in cumulative support to household consumption. That's around $283 billion. On the supply side, the policies benefited service sector businesses, including catering, accommodation, culture and entertainment, and elderly care services. On the demand side, they increased the residents' purchasing power and complemented other pro-consumption measures, such as subsidies and trade-in programs. So far this year, 187.5 billion yuan in central funding for the trade-in program has driven 1.3 trillion yuan in sales and benefited around 178 million people. Now, for more on China's fiscal policy, Lili Lu spoke with Wang Yaojing, an associate professor of economics at Peking University.
Let's start with this. What kind of key manifestation can we see of this year's more proactive fiscal policy, and what direct economic impacts have these measures delivered so far?
So the more proactive fiscal policy is visible in three main areas. First is greater spending capacity and also earlier policy implementation and also closer coordination between the fiscal and financial tools. On the demand side, we have witnessed how the trade-in subsidies have encouraged households to replace cars, appliances, and digital products. And on the investment side, government bonds are supporting major national projects, infrastructure renewal, and also industrial upgrading. And for private and smaller businesses, fiscal interest subsidies and government-backed financing are helping them obtain credit at lower cost. And on the local government side, transfers are increased to protect essential public services and then also easing fiscal pressures at the grassroots level. So the impact is therefore quite direct. Consumer incentives generate retail sales, project funding creates investment and employment, and financing supports improves business confidence. And I also want to point out that fiscal policy is no longer relying solely on direct government spending, but is also more increasingly using limited public funds to mobilize bank lending, private investment, and also household consumption. So yes, this year's fiscal policy is larger in scale, faster in implementation, and also more targeted in its transmission. It is supporting the short-term demand while also investing in economics' long-term productivity capacity.
Okay, and also there are signs that fiscal spending is now shifting toward more human-centered investment and consumption stimulation. So what concrete policy moves can market participants expect?
Well, market participants can expect fiscal spending to become more closely connected with people's everyday needs. This includes greater support for childcare, education, healthcare, elderly care, and employment, alongside with continued measures to stimulate consumption. And the key change is that these two objectives are increasingly being combined. For example, better childcare and elderly care service reduce the financial and time burden facing the families, while also creating new demand and employment in the service sector. In the same way, improvement in healthcare and social security can reduce precautionary saving and give households greater confidence to consume. And besides households, businesses are always also expecting stronger support for service consumption. We see fiscal interest subsidies are being extended to more consumer activities and a broader range of financial institutions as well. Also, small business and services, as we mentioned earlier, are getting these financing support to getting more credits at lower cost. And this should benefit sectors such as tourism, culture, catering, healthcare, and household services. So investing in people should not be understood simply by increasing welfare expenditure. It is a strategy that combines social development with economic growth, which is to improve people's well-being, strengthen human capital, and also unlock more sustainable consumption.
That was Associate Professor Wang Yaojing at Peking University. The World Robot Conference in Beijing has released a report on China's humanoid robot industry. The report examines the industry's technology landscape, supply chain, and application scenarios. Zhang Feng is the president of its China Humanoid Robotics Committee of 100.
Humanoid robots are accelerating their transition from small batch trials to regular deployment and large-scale application. In the first half of 2026, China's humanoid robot shipments exceeded 40,000 units, lifting its share of the global total to 97%. A 4-in-1 industrial ecosystem is also taking shape, led by standards development based on talent cultivation, expanded through international cooperation, and supported by innovation infrastructure.
Meanwhile, China's industrial robots are also gaining ground in overseas markets. In the first 7 months of this year, industrial robot exports surged over 13%, following 2025 when the country first became a net exporter of these products. The growth was largely driven by its robot manufacturing capabilities and resilient domestic demand. The International Federation of Robotics says China remains the world's largest market and producer of industrial robots for years, accounting for over half of the global total. China's power consumption by EV charging and data services jumped in July, driven by the fast-growing new energy vehicle and digital industries. According to the National Energy Administration, power consumption by charging and battery swapping services reached 16.4 billion kilowatt-hours last month, surging 50.3% on a yearly basis. Power consumption by internet data services jumped 40% to 9.9 billion kilowatt-hours. The country's total electricity consumption for July exceeded 1 trillion kilowatt-hours, up 1.7%. Power consumption by high-tech and equipment manufacturing industries climbed almost 9%. The electricity consumption is widely seen as a barometer of economic activity, with shifts in power demand offering clues to changes in industrial structure and growth drivers. A survey released by Denmark's largest bank, Danske, shows that consumers across the Nordic countries have become less confident about their personal finances this year, with Finland recording the weakest level among the 4 surveyed countries. According to the bank's latest survey, the index measuring confidence in personal finances declined in all 4 Nordic countries. Finland's index fell to 5.8 from 6.0 in 2025, the lowest among the 4 countries. Denmark recorded the sharpest decline, falling to 6.2 from 6.5. Danske Bank says financial confidence across the region has been weighed down by broadly similar factors, including inflation concerns fueled by a surge in oil prices amid the conflict and military tensions in the Middle East. Higher energy costs have added to household living expenses and renewed concerns over inflation across the Nordic countries. Despite the weaker overall readings, the survey shows that many respondents remain relatively optimistic about their financial situation over the longer term.
Thank you very much. Now was Wang Zihang with Business. You're listening to the Beijing Hour. Coming up in sports, the latest from the Badminton World Championships in India.
Sideline Story brings you all things sports related. The hottest topics, latest events, juiciest stories, all with a very personal take. Subscribe to Sideline Story Podcast for heated sports discussions covering events that are happening in China and around the world.
Turning to sports, here's Yang Guang.
Thank you, Tianlu. At Badminton World Championships in New Delhi, Wang Zhiyi and Han Yue are through to the women's singles quarterfinals, keeping China's hopes alive. Han Yue now faces a huge test, taking on world number 1 An Se-yong in the quarterfinals.
Maybe my opponent gave up a little early, and I may have won just 1 more point than her. The match got tougher as it went on, so I didn't have much pressure. I'll treat tomorrow's match like training and just go out there and challenge her.
China also delivered a strong showing in the doubles. Liang Weikeng and Wang Chang fought through a 3-set thriller, while Liu Xingshu, Tan Ning, and Jia Yifan, Zhang Shuxian also booked their quarterfinal spots. Top seeds Feng Yanzhe, Huang Dongping powered into the mixed doubles quarterfinals, with 4 Chinese pairs making the last 8. In the men's singles, Li Shifeng surrendered a 1-set lead before falling to Kodai Naraoka in 3 sets, leaving China without a player in the quarterfinals. Former Olympic champion Chen Yufei also saw her campaign come to an end against her Thai opponent in the women's singles. In basketball, China have stormed into the FIBA U18 Asia Cup semifinals with a 118-117-103 win over the Philippines, while also securing a spot in next year's FIBA U19 Basketball World Cup. China have lit up the scoreboard from beyond the arc, sinking 17 of 33 three-pointers, with 4 players hitting double figures. They will face either Japan or New Zealand for a place in the final. The FIBA U19 World Cup will be held in the Czech Republic from June the 26th to July the 4th next year. And Asian Women's Volleyball Championship, the action is underway in Tianjin, with 12 teams battling for a ticket to the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics. China has named a 14-player squad including Captain Gong Xiangyu, Wang Yuanyuan, Wu Mengjie, and Zhuang Yushan. Gong says she's looking forward to the challenge.
This is my first time playing at the Asian Championship, and I feel very excited. My teammates and I always lift each other up on the court. When we encounter challenges and difficulties in the upcoming matches, we will use brief words to encourage and remind one another.
China has won a record 13 titles, with the most recent crown coming in 2015. The teams are split into 3 groups for the opening rounds. China will face Chinese Taipei, Iran, and Iraq in Group A. Iraq are making their Asian Championship debut. Moma Munir Askar says she feels lucky to be part of the tournament.
We're very blessed and we're very lucky to be here in China to represent our country. And our first game is against the hometown team, China. We've prepared ourselves very well. We know that China team is such a big team, very big team worldwide. Of course, for us, it's going to be a hard game. But of course, we're going to play as much as we can get.
Defending champions Thailand headline Group B alongside Kazakhstan, Indonesia, and Australia. FIFA has unveiled a full schedule for the 2027 Women's World Cup, confirming the dates and the venues for all 64 matches across 8 host cities in Brazil. The World Cup will kick off on June 24th next year at Maracana Stadium. 32 teams will compete at the tournament, with 18 nations, including China, already securing their places. The group stage draw will take place in Brazil this December. Meantime, Brazilian football legend Ronaldinho has arrived in Italy to join Serie C side Ravenna, making a stunning return to professional football 11 years after his last competitive appearance. The former Barcelona and AC Milan star signed a one-season deal with the Italian third-tier club in June and will be officially registered as a player. At 46, Ronaldinho is chasing the 300-goal milestone, although the club has yet to announce a date for his debut. Borussia Düsseldorf has officially unveiled Chinese table tennis star Fan Zhendong at a press conference. The Olympic champion now prepares for his second season in the German table tennis Bundesliga and another European campaign. The club signed Fan to a one-season deal that took effect on July 1st. Fan spent last season with Saarbrücken, helping the club win the German Cup, Champions League, and the Bundesliga title to complete a historic treble. He won 20 of 23 Bundesliga matches and earned the Player of the Season honors. Four-time Formula One world champion Max Verstappen has signed a new contract with Red Bull, keeping him with the team through 2030. He had been linked with possible moves to Mercedes and McLaren as Red Bull struggled at the start of Formula One's new technical era. But Verstappen says Red Bull is his second family, and he remains determined to help the team return to championship-winning form.
Yeah, the discussions have been good, and I feel really at home here. Plus, getting to work with Laurent now for over a year, it's been for me at least very straightforward and very enjoyable. So to be able to then agree on a new deal is really nice.
Verstappen made his F1 debut with Red Bull's junior team in 2015 before joining the senior squad in 2016. He won on his Red Bull debut at the Spanish Grand Prix and has since claimed 4 world titles and 71 race victories, third on the all-time list behind Lewis Hamilton and Michael Schumacher.
Thank you very much. And that was Yang Guang with sports. You're listening to the Beijing Hour. Coming up in culture and entertainment. Chinese anti-war film Once Upon a Time in the Middle East is taking cinemas by storm.
From north to south, east to west, people in China are chasing their dreams and leaving their mark. Want to know how they beat the odds and made a difference? Footprints brings you the true life stories of their journeys.
Now it's 52 minutes past the hour, turning to culture and entertainment. The Chinese film Once Upon a Time in the Middle East has hit cinemas nationwide, offering a fresh take on the traditional war film narrative. Set in a Chinese restaurant in war-torn Iraq, the film follows a chef who uses food to bring comfort and a sense of safety to local civilians amid the chaos. The film has grossed more than 1.3 billion yuan, or about $180 million in its first 10 days. For more, Song Ruixing spoke with Zhang Junnan, the film's English subtitle translator.
Now that Once Upon a Time in the Middle East has announced its overseas release plan, and your subtitles, of course, will effectively become the first conversation with those international audiences. So, from your point of view, when you make a Chinese film more accessible to those international audiences, where is the line between helping them to understand those Chinese culture and changing the film to make it more accessible?
Well, I think translation is what we're doing is trying to reduce the language barrier, because there are two types of audience of the English subtitle itself. People who know nothing about Chinese, they can only rely on the English subtitle to comprehend the lines. And people who are bilingual, people who knows Chinese and English at the same time, they may check or may not check the subtitles. But my real purpose, my real audience are the former. Now, people who don't know anything about it. The thing that I would pay much attention to is for them to understand very quickly about what this line is about, because they also have to pay attention to the pictures, not just the words. So I wouldn't do much of the change of the meaning unless I had to.
I recently read a report. The director Wen Muye has said that 3 meals a day, as it is kind of representing people's longings for peaceful life, and it is just a goal for ordinary people. And then I've seen some Hollywood war films, not all of them, but most of them are building on heroes and battlefields and even victory. What does this different way of telling a war story reveal about this Chinese perspective of peaceful wish?
We're kind of people who has this grassroots perspective all the time. We always talk about the people, the people's, everything for the people. So I think one thing that our civilization is like this long-lasting history is because we value the survival of our family, family, and the whole nation, and also we value this long heritage along through generations. It's something that's built in our genes. This grassroots perspective, especially when it's combined with something like food. This is what I call the most common factor for all people. It's about most common factor. And these are things that we can start with to talk about, to tell stories.
That was Zhang Junnan, the English subtitle translator for anti-war film Once Upon a Time in the Middle East. Chinese video game developer Game Science has released a 15-minute trailer for Black Myth Zhongkui, the next title in its hit Black Myth franchise. The sequel to Black Myth Wukong has no release date yet, and the developer says the footage comes from an early work-in-progress build. The game is based on Zhongkui, a legendary Chinese demon hunter and guardian figure known for vanquishing ghosts and evil spirits. The trailer has already surpassed 1 million views. Now it's 57 minutes past the hour, checking the forecast for the day. Beijing will have thundershowers tonight and tomorrow. The low is 24 and it's up to 32 on Saturday. Shanghai will see light rain tonight and tomorrow with a low of 26 and a high of 31. Chongqing will be cloudy tonight and tomorrow with a low of 27 and a high of 35. Nanchang will see thundershowers tonight and tomorrow with a low of 27 and a high of 33. Lhasa will have light rain tonight, tomorrow showers with a low of 12 and a high of 21 degrees Celsius. That's it for this edition of the Beijing Hour Making News Today. China and Indonesia have held their inaugural comprehensive strategic dialogue in Jakarta. The United States has threatened to impose what it calls the toughest sanctions in history on Iran. On behalf of the staff, this is Tianlu in the Chinese capital. Hoping you'll join us for the next edition of the Beijing Hour and open the window to the world together.
The best military commander is not he who fights 100 battles and wins every one of them. The best military strategy does not lead to the desiccation of the enemy's capital city. Decoding the Art of War will help you understand why there's no art in war and how Sun Tzu stayed undefeatable using the science of war, with fun stories and insightful breakdown of famous battles. Find Decoding the Art of War wherever you listen.
A poem for the Tibetan antelope, the gentle spirit of the Qinghai Seazong Plateau, spoken by voices from across the world. Every spring, female antelopes migrate hundreds of miles to Zhuonai Lake to give birth, as we build gentle passages for their journey.
Hello, little Tibetan antelope, eyes opening to the light for the very first time.
To see a world in a grain of sand, and a heaven in a wild flower.
So much wonder calls for so much courage. But have no fear. The way home is right there, waiting for you.
From the snows of Kunlun to the winds of Tangula, the wilderness will teach me to be strong.
But the call of life itself never ceases.
A train runs toward the horizon. A road stretches through the wilderness.
The bridge that soars through the clouds is no barrier across the land, but a gateway to where I truly belong.
Tibetan antelope's hoofprints loosen the soil, letting snow melt sink into the earth.
Human presence passes through,
but we've never walked this land alone.